20% of charter schools perform highly, and therefore 80% do not perform as well. Is that a characteristic of charter schools? And the other point that was made is that the system that's been presented so far basically relies on parents to advocate on behalf of their children. The question is, does that leave only those children who have effective parent advocates, parents who are able to express themselves well, as the ones who will benefit under that system? And is that fair for all children? So those are two very good points. Dr. Jump in.
Sure. The charter effectiveness question is a good one, and there are lots of competing studies about this. In my mind, national studies about charter schools are almost meaningless, because every charter school law in all the 41 states that have charter schools is very different. And the quality of the charter schools in a particular state depends a lot on how strong the accountability system is in that particular state, and how strong the approval process is for new charter schools in that state. So for those of you who don't know, charter schools are approved. They 5 years later go through a renewal process. If they're not performing, they can be shut down. If a state's not taking that process seriously, then those charter schools continue to exist that are not performing. I think that New Hampshire is taking that very seriously and has closed down schools that are not performing. And that's exactly the way it should be. You know, people that I am friendly with have been running those schools. I'm sorry, but if the school is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, then it should be closed down. That's how it should be. And it should be that way for charter schools, and it should be that way for all public schools. The issue of parent advocacy, I think, is an important one. And to me, what we haven't been able to do well yet in New Hampshire, and this is partially a critical mass problem, is really do a lot of parent education around what the options are. If there were 100 charter schools in New Hampshire, this might be easier. There are 11. So it's hard to do that widespread outreach to all of the parents in the state to really get them to understand that there are options for them. A lot of the charter schools in New Hampshire now are doing monthly open houses. We have been doing it for 4 or 5 years now, and invite people in, put it in the paper every month, and invite people in to get the word out about, yes, we're there, yes, it's free, you know, it is a lottery, and those are growing every year. So at this point, when it comes to application deadline time, we've got 50 parents in the room every month. So to me, that's a lot of that is about parent education about what the options are. Because you're right, there are parents who know more about, or who do more research, or who are stronger advocates, or more well-connected in the community and know what the options are already. I think it's incumbent upon the schools and upon the state education leadership to educate parents about what those options are.
I just had a couple comments from a couple of questions here. One is that I just hope everyone knows that in New Hampshire, the charter schools are public schools. So I know they show different pieces of that in the film, but in New Hampshire, the charter schools are public schools. And in response to parents getting involved, and those parents who are advocates, you know, in the film seem to be the ones that were able to move their children forward. And I think that what is really important, and what's been important to me working in education, is that we know that children do not all learn the same. We know that. That's a given. So we need, as a state and in public education, to have a system where every child succeeds and that there are options there for every child, not just if your parents are an advocate, because we know that. So one size does not fit all. So we see charter schools, we see different options, not one kind of education is going to work across the system. So I think we have to be open to different ideas within our schools, schools within schools, innovation within schools. And I think you have people here who are working on that every single day. I see it, I hear them, and I work with them, and they're doing that because, you know, we will not accept, you know, one child who fails. But I think also we have nationally and just in our minds all the time a 1950 education system, and we keep that, and then we decide we're going to add something on top of that that's innovative or something new, and so the money goes to all of these new programs plus maybe some things that aren't working. I think an emphasis on funding what is successful is where we need to go. What works, what's working for schools, what's in the child, and that's what we're going to pay for. If we decide as a community or as a state what's important to us, we'll find a way to pay for that. But we first have to agree on what's important to us. And I think what we're seeing in this film is that the education, the bottom line, education is what has to be most important, and I think probably is to people in this room or you wouldn't be here, because it not only affects each child, it affects our communities and our economy. So if we're not investing in education, we are not going to succeed. You saw the statistics on what's happening for offenders and how much we're paying in a prison system. I know in my community, in the county prisons, in a county jail, $90 a day for an offender, and it's $35 a day for a high school student. So what's important to us? Where do we want to invest the money that we do have? And you know, there are some things in life you think, maybe we can't make a difference, but we can make a difference in every child. And if we make a difference in education, we make a difference in every single one of our lives and in our community. So I think we have to really come together to say it's important. We know that every child learns different, and we will have a system that every child has the availability to be educated and not fail.
I just want to follow up on that very briefly, not necessarily with you though, and that is you are talking about one of the problems identified in the film of additional requirements, additional approaches laid on top of an existing system that's been in place since World War II, or if you will. So my question, perhaps to Dr. Brennan, is do we have bureaucratic inertia, or do we have the beginnings of a bureaucratic flexibility so that we can rework our schools so that we don't have this kind of sedimentary effect of innovation on top of innovation over time?
I believe we do have some slow-moving processes known as the bureaucratic process. I was just thinking as I listened to everyone talk, and even myself, that this seems to be one of the most longest-running soap operas I've ever been involved in terms of 35 years ago when I began my profession, I was hearing the same things that I'm hearing tonight. And that's frustrating, particularly when I play a role in that. I do hope that there is flexibility, but it needs to be, and I don't want to overuse this word, courageous, but you need to have courageous teachers and administrators to come forward and to say, this is unacceptable. After so many years, we can no longer accept this. They talk about, you know, Rip Van Winkle, when he wakes up, he only will recognize 2 institutions after 100 years of sleep. That would be our state prisons and our high schools. Think about it. Think how close to that state, how real that statement is. So what can we do? We can continue to press forward on the flexibility piece. We've asked our current administration in Washington has asked us numerous times, what would you want to have happen? And I think the one word that is probably consistent throughout the 50 states and all of our other properties, Puerto Rico, etc., is flexibility. We received ARA funds. I know this is a long answer, but at the end of this year, our ARA money...
That's the stimulus package.
Stimulus package for education, IDEA and ARA money. We were told we needed to expend those dollars. but we needed to follow these specific guidelines, which prohibited us from, in my opinion, really making an impact in education. I also find it very ironic is that the banks were given more money and less restrictions. We're probably the most regulated system in the country, and yet every time we look for funding, we have to follow those loopholes, or not loopholes. We look for the loopholes. But it's ironic that they continue to put those things out there. Even when you talk about innovation, when you're given an innovation grant, you are asked in some part of that petition or that proposal, where has this worked before?
Just in the interest of...
I'm sorry.
No, I just want to make sure we have enough time for as many questions as possible. So if you could give a brief response.
I was just going to, Dr. Brennan, I was just going to ask you a question myself. There's a lot of inspiring examples of things that can be done in the movie. Do you have any plans to open charter schools in Manchester, to change, say, one of your elementary schools into a charter school? That is something you could do without any permission from the federal government or from anybody.
Manchester? I'd be happy to answer that. Yes, we do. Actually, we're involved with the Department of Education, having a conversation now in terms of how we may institute a public charter school in our system. I'm not opposed to charter schools. I actually was part of a group that formed a charter school between and among 3 school districts in the Lake Sunapee region. I don't think we should be restricted to charter schools, magnet schools, whatever schools you want to call them, but we need to find ways to present opportunities, and if that's one way, let's do it.
Well, it has been shown to be a way.
Okay, some people have been patient with their questions. Sir?